I opened my bedroom door and found a stranger sleeping in my bed. Before we begin the story, take a moment to support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support means the world to our channel and helps us spread more shocking true stories to light. Now let's get started. I had barely stepped through the front door when I knew something was off. Not just a little off. Something deep in my gut told me I didn't belong here anymore. The air smelled different, like detergent I didn't recognize, mixed with the faint scent of cologne that wasn't my dad's. And then the first real sign, a pair of men's sneakers by the door, way bigger than my father's. A hoodie was draped lazily over the back of the couch, one I had never seen before. Before I could even process what I was looking at, my mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "There's my college girl," she chirped, her smile stretched a little too wide, a little too practiced, like she was bracing for something. I forced a small smile, still adjusting to the strange energy in the room. "Hey, Mom." She pulled me into a quick hug before stepping back, her hands clapping together as if she were about to present something exciting. "We've made some changes," she announced like this was a game show, and I was about to win a brand new car. Something uneasy twisted in my stomach. "Changes? Oh, nothing major," she tossed over her shoulder as she started walking down the hall, expecting me to follow. "Just some rearranging. You'll see." I hesitated before stepping forward, my heart pounding a little harder with every step. The hallway looked the same old carpet, the same family pictures on the walls. But then I saw it. My bedroom door was open, and my bedroom wasn't mine anymore. A stranger in my own room. I froze in the doorway, my brain scrambling to process what I was seeing. The deep blue walls I had carefully chosen as a teenager, gone, replaced by a dull, impersonal beige. My posters, the ones I'd spent hours arranging, were missing. My bookshelf, once crammed with novels I'd collected since middle school, had vanished. My old stuffed bear, the one I always kept on my bed, was nowhere in sight. Instead, there was a different bed, a bigger one, a different desk shoved against the far wall. A duffel bag lay open on the floor, clothes spilling out like someone had just arrived and made themselves at home. A pair of sneakers, huge sneakers, were kicked off near the closet. Someone else was living in my room. I turned slowly, my mouth dry, my voice barely above a whisper. "What is this?" My mom stood in the doorway, watching me carefully. "Oh," she said with a light laugh, waving a hand like this was nothing. "We gave your room to Zach." Zach, my cousin, the one I barely saw growing up, the one who bounced from job to job, always blaming the world for his problems. The one my mom had always told me we had to be patient with because he's just going through a rough patch. I stared at her, waiting for some kind of punchline, some kind of just kidding. But she just kept smiling like this was completely normal. I exhaled slowly, my voice unervingly steady. "You gave my room to Zach?" She nodded, completely unfazed. "Well, honey, you don't live here anymore." It didn't make sense to keep the room empty. A strange, heavy pressure settled in my chest, like something inside me was sinking. She kept talking, as if she truly believed she had done nothing wrong. "You know how hard things have been for him. He just needed a place to stay. And we thought, well, since you're off at school." But I wasn't listening anymore. My ears were ringing. For years. For years of pushing myself, working late nights, juggling part-time jobs just to make it through college. For years of doing everything on my own, proving that I could stand on my own 2 feet. And the second I was gone, they erased me like I had never existed. She must have noticed the look on my face because she quickly added, "You can sleep on the couch. It's only for a little while. I knew you wouldn't mind." And that was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I took a slow step back, gripping my keys tightly. "Actually," I said, voice unwavering, "I'll sleep somewhere else." Her smile faltered. "What? Don't be ridiculous." But I didn't answer. I turned, walked right back down the hall, grabbed my bag, and headed for the front door. I could hear her calling after me, something about not making a scene, but I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. Not until I was already in my car, the door slamming shut behind me. Nowhere to go, but anywhere but here. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breath felt uneven, like I had just run a marathon, even though I had barely taken a dozen steps. Where's I even going? I hadn't planned for this. In my head, I had pictured coming home, sleeping in my bed, maybe even getting some kind of lukewarm acknowledgement from my family, some small sign that they were, I don't know, proud of me, that they had missed me. Instead, they had wiped me out of the house like I had never been there, like I was some temporary guest instead of their daughter. I glanced back toward the house. The porch light cast a dim glow over the yard, and through the window, I could see movement. My mom still standing near the front door, probably waiting for me to cool off and come back inside. Like I was just being dramatic. Like this was normal. I turned the key in the ignition and backed out of the driveway. I had no idea where I was going. The streets were quiet, lined with familiar streetlights flickering in the darkness. I kept driving, half on autopilot, my mind racing through the last 15 minutes, replaying every detail, every word. They had given my room to Zach. Zach, who had never held a steady job for more than a few months. Zach, who spent most of his adult life couch hopping because he couldn't keep his life together. Zach, who, despite all his failures, was the one they made space for. Not me. I tightened my grip on the wheel, my jaw clenching. It wasn't even just about the room. It was about what it meant. The way my mom acted like it was just common sense to hand over the only space I had ever truly called my own. Like my presence in that house had been temporary all along. I checked my phone, half considering calling a friend. But it was late. Most of the people I had stayed close with from high school had either moved away or were too wrapped up in their own lives. My college friends were hours away. I could get a motel. But the idea of spending money I had worked so hard to save, just because my own family had kicked me out of my space made my stomach turn. Then, almost without thinking, I turned onto a familiar street. Ezra's house. I hadn't talked to him much in the past few months. We had been close all through high school, the kind of friendship that felt like it would last forever. But then college happened, and life got in the way. We had kept in touch here and there, occasional texts, a few video calls when we had the time, but I hadn't seen him in person in over a year. Still, as I pulled up outside his house, I felt something I hadn't felt all night. Relief. His car was in the driveway. He was home. I hesitated for a moment before stepping out of the car and walking up to the front door. The porch light was on, casting a soft glow over the old welcome mat. I knocked. Then, I took a step back, suddenly unsure if this was even a good idea. A few seconds passed. Then the door creaked open. Ezra stood there, squinting at me like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. His dark hair was a mess, sticking up in every direction, and he was wearing an old hoodie that I vaguely recognized from years ago. Did I hit my head, or are you actually standing on my porch right now? I let out a weak laugh, though it came out more like a breath. Hey, Ezra. He blinked, looking me up and down, and then his expression shifted. His usual easygoing demeanor faltered just slightly. You okay? I exhaled. Not really. For a second, he didn't say anything, just looked at me, taking in whatever mess was probably written all over my face. Then he sighed and stepped aside. Come in. Falling apart in a familiar place. I hesitated for just a second, glancing back toward my car. A part of me still felt like I should keep driving, like I should find a different place to fall apart. But the thought of wandering around aimlessly all night made my stomach churn. So I stepped inside. The house smelled like something slightly burnt, probably whatever late-night snack Ezra had been making before I showed up at his door. The living room looked exactly the same as I remembered, cluttered but comfortable. A half-empty mug sat on the coffee table, and a game controller was tossed onto the couch, like he had abandoned it mid-game. Ezra shut the door behind me, crossing his arms as he studied my face. All right, he said, his voice softer now. What happened? I swallowed, suddenly unsure how to explain it all. But then, before I could even stop myself, the words started spilling out. I sat down on his couch, hands gripping my knees, and told him everything. The call from my mom, how I actually thought, just for once, that maybe she was happy to see me. The long drive home, the weird feeling when I walked in. The moment I saw my room and realized it wasn't mine anymore. How my mom had smiled like it was all perfectly normal. Ezra didn't interrupt me once. He just sat there, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, listening. By the time I finished, my throat felt tight, my hand still clenched in my lap like I was holding on to something that had already slipped through my fingers. Ezra exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. Wow, he finally said. That's seriously messed up. I let out a short, humorless scoff. Yeah, a little bit. He sat back, rubbing his jaw. And they didn't even tell you beforehand? Nope. I leaned into the couch, pressing my palms over my face for a moment before dropping them into my lap. They acted like it was just the natural next step. Like, oh, of course my room should go to Zach. Of course I wouldn't mind. I don't live there anymore, so why would I care? Ezra was quiet for a second, and when I looked at him, his expression had shifted, his usual laid-back attitude replaced by something sharper. That's not how normal parents treat their kid, you know. I let out a breathy laugh, dry and bitter. Yeah, my parents never really followed the parenting manual. Ezra shook his head, muttering something under his breath before looking back at me. What's their deal with Zach anyway? I mean, I remember him being kind of a loser, but this is next level. That was the question, wasn't it? I shrugged, but the truth was I knew. I had always known. They've always babied him, I admitted. I don't know why. Maybe because he's just helpless. He messes up, and they swoop in to fix it. He wastes money, and they cover for him. He loses a job, and they understand. I paused, staring down at my hands. They've never done that for me. Ezra frowned. Because you don't need them to. I exhaled sharply. Exactly. And that was the heart of it, wasn't it? I had never needed them. Not the way Zach did. I had always taken care of myself, worked for my own money, solved my own problems. When I told them I wanted to go to college, they laughed and said, good luck with that. When I got in, they barely reacted. And when I left, it was almost like they had just forgotten about me. Ezra leaned back, tapping his fingers against his knee. So what now? That was the real question, wasn't it? I had nowhere to go, not long-term, anyway. I could crash in a motel, but that felt like admitting defeat. I could try to stay with another friend, but most of them had moved on, scattered across different cities, different lives. I exhaled. I don't know. Ezra was quiet for a second. Then he sighed. You can stay here. I blinked. What? He shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. Stay here. At least until you figure things out. For a second, I didn't know what to say. It was tempting. Safer than a motel. More comfortable than bouncing from place to place. But I also knew my mom. She wasn't going to let this go. And as if on cue, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen. Mom. Ezra must have noticed the change in my expression because he raised an eyebrow. I'm guessing that's her. I swallowed. Yeah. You gonna answer? I hesitated, staring at the screen as the vibration buzzed against my palm. I already knew what she was going to say. That I was overreacting. That I was being selfish. That I was embarrassing them by making a big deal out of nothing. But I didn't owe her an explanation. I silenced the call and set my phone face down on the table. Ezra smirked. Nice. I let out a slow breath. She's not done, though. And I was right. Because 20 minutes later, the calls started coming in waves. First my mom. Then my dad. Then, of all people, Zach. I ignored them all. But I wasn't surprised when I heard the knock on the door the next morning. The knock on the door. I was sitting at Ezra's kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and scrolling through my phone when I heard it. The sharp, deliberate knock at the front door. I didn't even flinch. I had been expecting this. Ezra, still half asleep across from me, barely looked up from his bowl of cereal. He was wearing the same hoodie from last night, his hair sticking up in every direction. He raised an eyebrow. That them? I sighed, setting my coffee down. Who else? Ezra shrugged, lazily poking at his cereal. Well, if it's a door-to-door salesman, tell him we're not interested. I let out a breathy chuckle, but it died quickly, because I already knew who it was. I got up and went to the door. Peeking through the peephole, I wasn't surprised to see my mom standing there, arms crossed, foot tapping impatiently against the porch. She looked like she had been waiting for hours. I opened the door just enough to step into the doorway, blocking her view inside. She didn't even wait for a greeting. What do you think you're doing? She hissed. I blinked, feigning innocence. Good morning to you too. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Enough with the attitude. You didn't come home last night. I folded my arms. Yeah, I figured since you gave away my room, I didn't have to check in like a child. Her jaw clenched. I saw it, The exact moment she realized I wasn't going to back down. That threw her off. She was used to me keeping my head down, avoiding confrontation. "Well," she said, voice tight, "you could have at least stayed to talk about it instead of storming off." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Talk about what? You made the decision without me. What was there to discuss?" Mom huffed, shifting her weight. "You don't even live there anymore. It just made sense. Zach needed a place to stay, and you're off at college. I come home." I cut in, my voice colder now. "Or at least I used to. But clearly, you didn't care about that." She exhaled sharply through her nose, barely holding onto her patience. "You're being dramatic." There it was. The classic dismissal. I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice level. "No, I'm not. You didn't even tell me. You just erased me like I was never there." Mom threw her hands up. "It's a room. Don't be so selfish. Zach needed a place, and we did what was best for the family." The family. That hit harder than I expected, because that was what it always came down to, wasn't it? The family. The one I apparently wasn't a part of. I stared at her for a long moment, then shook my head. "You really don't see it, do you?" Mom frowned. "See what?" "You bend over backwards for Zach," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You always have. You've spent his whole life bailing him out, fixing his mistakes, making sure he never faces the consequences of his own choices. And me?" I let out a short breath. "You gave him my room because he's your priority, not me." Her face darkened. "That's not true, isn't it?" I tilted my head. "Name one time you've helped me the way you help him." She opened her mouth, then closed it. No answer. I scoffed. "Exactly." Her frustration turned to anger. "This isn't about favoritism. Zach needed a home, and we gave it to him. At my expense." "You're gone for most of the year," she snapped. "What did you expect us to do? Leave it empty?" "I expected you to respect me enough to tell me before throwing my stuff in storage." She rolled her eyes. "We didn't throw it away." "Oh, thank you so much for that," I said dryly. Her jaw tightened. "Look, I came here to bring you home. Enough with this tantrum." I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. "I'm not coming back." That made her freeze. She blinked, like she hadn't actually considered that possibility. "What?" "I'm done," I said, my voice steady. "You made it clear where I stand in this family, and I finally get it. So no, I'm not coming back. Keep the room. Keep Zach. I'll figure out my own life." Mom looked stunned, like she had expected me to yell, to break down, to lash out. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. "You're overreacting," she tried again. But her voice wasn't as confident now. I smiled faintly. "No, I'm just finally seeing things for what they are." I turned to step back inside, but she grabbed my arm. "You can't just leave," she said, her voice lower now. Almost panicked. "We're your family." I pulled my arm away. "Yeah," I said quietly. "You should have acted like it." And with that, I stepped back inside and shut the door in her face. Where I go from here? So, here's where I'm at now. I'm staying at Ezra's place. My mom keeps calling, but I'm not answering. She showed up this morning, and we had a long conversation about everything, but it was clear she still doesn't get it. She thinks I'm overreacting, that I should just suck it up and come back home. But I've had enough. I've been the one who worked hard to get where I am. I've been the one who made sacrifices, who made sure I didn't rely on anyone to take care of me. Meanwhile, Zach keeps getting a free pass. And I'm just supposed to be okay with it? I'm not going back to that house. But I'm starting to wonder, am I the a-hole for leaving? Should I just swallow my pride and let things go? My mom is convinced I'm making this a bigger deal than it really is. But I feel like I've been pushed to my limit. Let me know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. What would you have done in this situation? I'd love to hear your take. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.